Welcome along to Tweet Street Scotland Occupied, home of the satirical Salta. I'm Cinnamon Bridges, aka Peter. With me this evening, our guest is now newly independent councillor for East Ayrshire. It's John Bell. How are you doing, John? Good to see you, mate.
Very well, Peter. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
You're very welcome, mate. I've tried to get you on before because you were running about the area in which concerns me as far as the electorate goes. And of late, then there was a wee announcement on Monday on Twitter. You tell us what happened, John.
Well, I've been unhappy with various things with the leadership, the Holyrood leadership, the party, the SNP for quite some time. I spoke a while ago to the leader in the East Ayrshire group, Douglas Reid, when I told him I would not be standing again for the SNP in the Doon Valley, the most beautiful ward in Ayrshire. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I've been here for as a councillor for 10 years. It's been great fun, but I told him I couldn't do it again. I couldn't do it for a host of different reasons. The debacle over the mixed gender toilets in schools is one of them. Women's safe spaces is a huge one. I have 2 daughters, I've got a granddaughter, and I've got my wife, and I've got to really look after. I feel as if I have a responsibility to them. So if we can't protect them or assist in protecting them, then we're not doing our job. So anyway, that's plus, of course, the lack of progress on independence, which is an absolute nightmare. We should have, in my opinion, as soon as we elected 56 MPs on the election in 2015, we should have went down and started negotiations then, because we had the overwhelming majority, the overwhelming support of the membership of the Scottish public to do that. Then, of course, the Brexit, we should have immediately begun proceedings to dissolve the Treaty of Union, because Brexit was inflicted on us against our will. While I said that my ward's one of the most beautiful, is really easily the most beautiful ward in East Ayrshire, it's also one of the poorest. And my folk really get hammered by the carry on, but the lack of support that's come. We get some support. I'm not saying the Scottish Government don't do some, but they could do a lot more. And if we had the full powers in an independent country, then we could do all we need to do, but we just don't have them. And the way I see it is, we won't have them as long as the present leadership's in place, or if one of our stooges gets selected to lead the country after it. It'll take a tsunami to get them out, but it needs to happen, in my opinion. It's, again, all of this is just my opinion. It's just the way I see it. And I'm so disappointed, because I first met Nicola Sturgeon in 2010. That was the first time I stood for election. It was a by-election in Ward 9. Obviously, I didn't get in, but I got a 10% swing of the vote. And that was before the SNP bandwagon had started rolling. So a 10% swing of the vote in what at the time was a hugely Labour ward was, I thought, was a good achievement. And then when it came to the 2012 election, I got in easily. I got in on the last election as well, 2017. It was a wee bit more difficult, because we, as well as myself, we stood a lady beside me in the SNP vote split. And I think if it wasn't for my own personal vote, then I wouldn't have got in, but we got in. So that I got in. So I've been able to continue my work for my constituents in that time.
Well, talking about, you'd mentioned about your daughters, your granddaughter and your wife. What's a woman to you, John?
It's an adult human female. The only that says it's no, it's got a screw loose. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but the fact is that you know, some Peter, when I was at school, I left the school when I was 15 years old. I left with a scatter of A levels, and one of the A levels was a biology O level, sorry, O levels, and one of the O levels was a biology O level. And I was so into science that I actually won a science trophy based on biology. I got to keep a big silver cup for a year, and then I had to hand it back in. But I won that trophy, and I know, but my daughter's got a dog, and I know my daughter's dog's a bitch. You know, and whether the dog identifies as something else, I know she's a bitch, and I know all my female relatives are female. Now, I have nothing but respect for trans people. Genuine people that genuinely believe they are trans. They need to be respected, and they need to be not denigrated in any way. The problem seems to be not with the trans people themselves. It seems to be with the activists that follow them. You know, it's this. I think they're using genuine cases of folk that need to be looked. I'm not saying looked after, because that sounds very condescending, but they need to be respected for who they are, no, not for who they're no. If you see what I mean.
I know where you're coming from, mate, and I think a lot of the people we have on this podcast, and it's one of the things that we say, it's we don't want to exclude anybody. What a lot of the Scottish public are concerns about is the fact that people are getting shut down. There is no debate. Women are getting attacked. When I say attacked, harassed to the point that it silences them. It doesn't give them a voice. What it then does, as far as I can see, from a safeguarding point of view, is that it allows for people. There's too many loopholes in the GRA and self-ID that and the way that they're trying to implement it, and the form that they're trying to implement it. There's too many loopholes for bad people to exploit.
That's exactly it. And I was going to say this, and I didn't know how to introduce it, but you've actually let me straight. You've opened the door, so I'm going to jump into it.
I'm
going to tell you right now, men are shit. Not all men are shit, but the proportion of men that are shit is absolutely frightening. You just need to look at these guys sending indecent photographs to young girls, or the way they talk to a girl working behind a counter, and it's absolutely dreadful. Now, the problem with the GRA as it's set up is we don't know, we won't be able to know if the person identifying as trans is genuinely identifying as trans, or if it's one of these shit men. And the ladies in the dressing rooms, and the ladies in the supposedly safe spaces, they won't know either. They won't know either. And men will do this. They will use their position, as has been proven various times in the past. And I don't care what shot. The most idiotic statement I've ever heard from a minister was Shona Robson saying that men don't pretend to be something else to be predators. I have never heard as much. Obviously, she has no. Again, I've met her too, and she's a lovely woman to speak to, but she doesn't seem to have a grasp, or alternatively, she's parroting lines that were written for her, and I believe that's what it would have been. And I believe I believe a bit of her was dying inside as she said it. If you get my drift.
I know where you're coming from.
I mean, I've had to do that in the past. This carry like the what you're supposed to say, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm just not saying that. That's just nonsense. And I believe she'd be feeling like that as well. But John Swinney's on one side, or Nicola Sturgeon's on the other side, and a lassie's caught in the headlights, and she's out she comes with it.
I mean, something that I've noticed with this movement is the best way that I can put it. Is that, I mean, because we've had all sorts of people on this podcast. With the Women's Trade Union Federation, and the common theme is that people are scared to speak up for fear of retribution, for fear of losing their job, for fear of losing the house and not being able to pay the mortgage, or all of these things coming into one. But the overriding fear that I've got is the fear that there's ulterior motives that are going to be exploited, and it's going to be the kids that are going to end up suffering. I mean, but from a safeguarding point of view, it's going to be the kids that end up suffering in that respect. From a young adult's point of view, where they're lopping off and mutilating their bodies because they're being told that, well, if you feel this, then you must be this. And the best thing you can do is take these drugs that will sterilise you, or go and get bits of your body mutilated to you. Young women, go and get your body mutilated. And that's wrong. That's indoctrination. I mean, I was saying to you just before we started recording about the missus. Really, my wife's a really chatty person. Another adult human female, really chatty person, and this concerns her. That have made her sit up and take notice and go, wait, no. So she chats to people. Just she always has been chatty. Kind of get her to shut up, and know that I would want her to wish. You know what I mean? But she was talking to the lass in the Chinese, and she was saying to her about this that was going on and the council elections coming up, and she had said to her about her niece had come home and said that she was a lesbian because that's what they told her at school, and she could kiss her girl pals in the school in primary 3. Now that's in a school, Wateriggs Primary School, an early learning, early childhood centre in Belfield and Kilmarnock. Now that's not too far from where I am, and it's not too far from where you are. I know.
No, it's got 20 mile, but not even that.
Right, so. We've had experiences with Perth Council doing this child sex survey and introducing questions that, and you said this, it was said in the article that was in the printed press today about that was something that concerns you also. It wasn't appropriate to be asking kids of that age these type of questions.
Do you want me to tell you why I don't think it's appropriate?
Please do.
Right. First of all, these children are going to be asked if they've had certain types of sex, right? All these children are being asked will be below, well, most of them will be below the age of consent. So straight away you're asking a youngster to admit to breaking the law. Okay. The second thing to do with it is, of course, that no government department's IT is secure. We've seen it with so many because they hack into the Pentagon. So they're going to be able to hack into the Scottish government if they want. And that information on each child is accompanied by an identifier so that that child can be tracked. That information will follow the kids all their life. And again, it's just these ones. I think is it for S2 onwards that I'm talking about. But even the younger children, where they're being asked, what kind of relationship do you have with your parents? And this is named person by the back door. That's what this is, because they get shot doing it. Named person, there's a grain of good idea in named person, because if you can prevent one child from being abused, that's a good thing. But the way it was done, as with so much legislation, and don't get me started, it's because we don't have a second chamber. But anyway, because there's so other legislation is very poorly structured. So that was that. One great fear that I've got about the sexual element of the questions is that if the responses say that 60 or 70% of people, children, are engaged in some sexual activity long before the age of 16, then I believe there might be a movement in the Scottish government, led by I don't know who, though I have my suspicion, to say that let's decriminalise these children. And the only way you can decriminalise those children is by lowering the age of consent. And maybe I'm just suspicious, or maybe I'm just old enough to ken, but I think that I'm at a stage now that I'm looking for ulterior motives everywhere I go. And I believe that that's a possible ulterior motive, is that if you can get 80% of the kids to say they're having sex at the age of 15, then the age of consent is reduced to 14.
Yep. That
puts children at even more risk. So you're failing in your duty to safeguard. And as a counsellor, if you fail to do your utmost to protect children, you're failing as a corporate parent, as a counsellor. And I take my council responsibilities extremely seriously, and I'll do whatever I can to protect my wains, because they're all my wains. That's the way I look at it. Every wain in these schools is my wain. It's my job to make sure that I do what I can to protect them. The parents will do the best job to protect their children. In 99% of the cases, parents are the people. They're the folk that they should be looking after their kids. What they don't need is some focused group coming in from Edinburgh saying, we Joe's actually we Jesse. You don't need that. And as you point, that's things like that's what's happening.
It's very concerning. It's completely blown apart safeguarding in schools, as you say. It's a way of, I mean, it's already been in the press that the Scottish government are looking at trying to lower the age of consent to 14. And as you say, I mean, I've looked at other things, and without getting into conspiracy theories, there's the potential that it could eradicate the age of consent and take it away altogether. And if you look at some of the ideologues that the people aspire to, what's his name? Foucault.
The guy. I know who you mean.
These people had the wrong, as far as I'm, they were wrong, and they had the wrong idea as far as kids were concerned. That they were there for their pleasure, and that for me, that's wrong. It's not in the society that we. I mean, we spoke offline the other day when we were trying to arrange this, and we both agreed that we're socialists at heart. And part of being a socialist, that for my understanding it when I was growing up, was that you looked after not just yourself, but anybody that couldn't look after themselves, you helped them out. If you weren't helping somebody out, then you weren't making the best of your own situation.
No, you're right enough. If you're a socialist, you look after everybody. That's your job. And I don't know if you read. Do you ever heard of a writer called Michael Connolly? He's got a character called Harry Bosch. The Harry Bosch is a detective, and Harry Bosch has got a statement and a plaque in his desk, and it says everybody counts or nobody counts. So that's the way it is. So you either look after everybody or you become a Tory and just look after your own. So you've got to look after everybody. That's the way I see it. And I've always seen it that way. See, I was a miner. I started doing the pit when I was 15. Well, I started in the pit head when I was 15, and I was doing the pit on my 16th birthday. And I was always a miner, and that was the socialist ideal. So you looked after. So we used to get concessionary coal, but if we come deliver and it would be dumped outside your door, and they bar it into your own coal house, but it was a free ton of coal. All you paid was like £2 or £3 for delivery. It was fantastic. Especially during the summer, you never used a ton. You always had plenty, right? So you made sure that the old folk round about you, they had, because it was all coal fires, nobody had gas fires. Right? So you made sure they had coal. So my mother used to tell me that the two barrows went down the road first before I started putting into it were in coal house. So you did this. This is what you done. And that's a socialist ideal, and to my opinion, the proper socialist ideal. And that's what I am. And as I said to you when we were talking offline, I'd spoke with Adam Ingram, because it was Adam Ingram, a man of an absolutely huge love and respect for, that actually that talked me into standing for council. And he'd say, I'd said, I'm not standing for you, a bunch of tartan Tories. That was the term at the time. And he says, no, he says, we're West of Scotland Socialists. And I said, oh, that'll do for me. And that's where I joined, but we're no West of Scotland Socialists on the mayor. Definitely no. Selling off the else for the price of a penny caramel. Absolutely horrendous. We could have had a recurring bounty after that every year for the licenses and what have you, but it's gone. But that's it.
I was going to say, tell me about, because you told me that you worked in the mines, but you also told me about you worked a lot in Ireland. Happy St. Patrick's Day to any of our Irish viewers. So you worked in Ireland. Tell me a wee bit about that, if you don't mind, John.
Well, I worked for a company out of Paisley, originally Barhead and then Paisley, Rocklift they were called. And they were a division of an Irish company, Murphy's. and Murphy's were based in Naas in Kildare. So they got they got a load of Irish quarries, and I went over there. I was explosives. I was a shot firer. The fancy term now is an explosive engineer, but it's just a monkey that puts powder down a hole. But that's what I done, and I absolutely loved it. I was there for on and off a grand totally about a decade. We're all through the Celtic Tiger. They were getting money for Europe to upgrade their roads. So the quarries were going full pelt, supplying aggregates to resurface all the roads. We were putting bypasses in left, right, and centre. Put in a bypass at Naas. Put in a bypass at Ballyshannon up in Donegal. Put in the Donegal bypass. Letterkenny, it was bypass, and it was absolutely fantastic. And they are the most beautiful people. They are lovely. I was based in Cavan and over in Galway, and we stayed at a wee bit called I'll say it their way, Ochterard. Because I used to get a rouse, I'd say Uchterard, and they say no, it's Ochterard. So I stayed in Ochterard and used to go train at the Galway City Gym, and got to know loads of people there. And I still keep in contact with some of them. And that'll be 15, 20 years ago now. But it was amazing. It was fantastic. And to be in a free country.
Aye.
This was the thing, to be in a free country. And when they would say to me about oh my God, I remember one time I was giving a lad a spot in the gym. They were doing bench presses, and I was giving him a spot, and I gave him a whole and a half. And then we were talking. The rugby was on. Rugby was on at the time, and he said, "You Brits," and I blew. I said, and of course, who the F are you calling a Brit? I said, I'm Scottish, I'm not a Brit, But in fact, I am British, but I'm British the same way a Norwegian's a Scandinavian. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's that, because we stay in the geographical, but I'm certainly not, my nationality.
I see, I'm Scottish, never British. It doesn't matter where I've been on holiday, anytime I've been confronted with that accusation, I quickly rebuff it, just probably the same as you did yourself in Ireland.
Exactly. But it's because we're chippy. We're chippy jocks, that's what it is, we're chippy jocks.
It's one of the ones that, by geographical area and part of the union, that I'll never agree to. I'm Scottish, and that's it. It doesn't matter where I go, I'll always be Scottish. The other thing that I was going to say to you was that in the press of late, there's been an announcement that Sinn Féin have asked for an immediate referendum for Irish unification. With your thoughts on Scottish independence, I don't suppose it'd be much different for Ireland reunifying.
Well, there was I seen a video clip the other day. I'm friends with a lady that she's a TD down in Naas, down in North Kildare, Rheda Cronin, and she's a Sinn Féin TD. And Rheda had pointed me to this clip. She says you need to look at this clip, and I looked at the clip, and I can't remember the gentleman's name to stop. But what he was saying was that the people that are going to vote for Irish reunification are now entering secondary school. Because of the again, probably. Because I think it's purely because of demographics. And that there'll be more voters, nationalist voters, than there will be unionist voters.
Yeah.
And it'll be just sheer weight of numbers will carry the unification. And I wish them well. I hope it happens the day before tomorrow. I really do. I think it would be the best thing for their country, because the Southern Ireland is no, don't call it Southern Ireland. It's Ireland. Because I would get a row for that off my pals. They don't like it. Ireland, and of course, what they do call the 6 counties, they call that the Wee North.
The Wee North.
The Wee North, right? So the people that are known the Wee North don't like to be cried Southern. So anyway, they would their standard of living is so much better than what it is in the Wee North. And it would be tough on them for a wee while, but they would rise everybody up to the same level of belief. There would be a leveling off, but it would be a high leveling off. The Southern wouldn't drop down. They would raise the North to their level, I believe. However, there's every cloud's got a dark centre, no a silver lining. And if this occurs before we achieve our independence, the dissolution of the union, then I honestly believe that we will never be independent. Never be independent. Because I think what will happen, and I have worked in the wee north, I worked at the Belfast Harbour for quite some time, with a lot of staunchly unionist fellas, lovely guys though, lovely people to work with. But I know how they feel, and I honestly believe that if they get their independence, if they get reunified, P and O will have to put more boats on. I ken they're after just now, but they'll need to put more boats on, because I believe there'll be an influx staunch people. We use staunch that way. Staunch people coming back into to the west of Scotland, and it'll be sufficient to, if there's no checks or balances or any kind of, and there shouldn't be, it's a democracy, one person, one vote. But I think that their vote will outweigh any gains that we're going to make between now and then for independence. I think will just be too many of them. And fair enough, that's how they feel. But I reckon we'll be trapped.
I mean, so it doesn't sit well with even the thought of that. It doesn't sit well with a lot of people in Scotland after what's happened with Brexit, after the renewable sell-off with the SNP. The energy price increase, P&O, as you mentioned today, where they laid off 800.
We heard this one, Peter. Did you hear drive time? I was heading to Catherine to meet my daughter, and drive time was on, and the young lad, well, it's not young lad, my God, he's a man. Jamie McIver, the presenter, he was saying that the P&O are in really dire straits because of COVID. And we all know that that's not true. P&O's in really dire straits because of Brexit, and the carry on we try to get stuff shipped across the Irish Sea. That's the problem. Now, there is an add-on with COVID, but the main problem is Brexit. It's a Brexit benefit. And again, benefit with these earmark things, but it's a Brexit benefit, and that's what P&O's in trouble with. It's not with COVID. COVID might have a wee thing, maybe stop like say me or you popping there with the missus for a weekend to Donegal or something. That'll stop us, but it doesn't stop the transport, because the trucks have got to run. The trucks have got to run, and they've got to go across in a ferry. And the problem is that the volume, because in Ireland, I do believe they're getting a lot more of the stuff shipped up for the south of the border, rather than shipping it across the Irish Sea.
Yep, but I mean, this is to do with the backstop, the issues with the backstop, and
that's it.
Well, the wee north, as you put it, it's quite apt. The wee north, how well they were doing after Brexit in comparison to 3 countries in the UK, sorry. So it's I mean, a lot of this stuff is getting clubbed in with COVID. It's a good graveyard. COVID has been a good graveyard for Brexit and all of the things. Then you've got the war in Ukraine. That everything's getting thrown in along with it, well, because of the war. I mean, the fuel prices here in my part of Scotland rose some like 17 pence in the space of 10 days, and I think it was about 9 days, 17 pence had an increase. And when you think of the poverty that already exists in Scotland, and the resources that Scotland has as a nation that get pilfered and get used for imperial dominance, it's disgusting.
I get it. Another thing is that I'm an ex-miner, right? I've got coal. I've still got coal for the Cllr bit in my body, because I've got blue marks where I've got affected with the coal. But as an ex-miner, I remember when I was doing my training, we used to go to Air Technical College for 1 day a week, and the gentleman David Miller, absolutely fantastic instructor, and he'd said Britain sits on a sea of coal. That's so much coal, we're never going to run out of coal. This is what he's saying. Obviously, there was no idea at that time of the environmental impact and what have you.
Yep.
But we still have all that coal. So we have all that energy lying below the ground that we're not using, that we're not going for. And again, this is just my personal opinion. I believe that what successive governments should have been doing was discovering ways to burn the coal cleanly, rather than locking the resource up.
Right.
You know, if you were able to burn the coal cleanly, you would have. Well, they did have that idea with the carbon capture and storage, but Alistair Darling shut it down because we didn't please him, and that was all because you're going to get it if you vote no, and then we voted no, and then we didn't get it. But that was the idea. So you burn the coal cleanly, so there's no excess carbon dioxide or anything like that getting out. And we would have so much energy, it'd be unreal. We could use the coal to make coal gas. Remember the old gasometers that you used to see? You made the coal, you could make coal gas out of that, using the coal a certain way. You treated the coal in the furnaces, and you made coal gas, and you put gas fires and what have you, or gas for the houses. There is ways around it, and there are people that are a lot more clever than the likes of us. We should be able to work that out.
Aye.
But at the moment, they've decided they're not going to go for coal. And then for certain members of the Scottish Government to turn around and say that we shouldn't even be taking any more oil out the North Sea, you're going to kick all the guys onto the dole, and you're going to impoverish us even further. You know,
it's throwing more people into poverty. It's making lives harder when there should be a way for Scotland to harness all of the renewables that it's got, and the resources that it's got, to make lives easier and make it better for folk. I mean, it's been disgusting. I wanted to ask you something, because we mentioned about the Ukraine. I'm going to play a video in a wee minute, but what's your thoughts on Nicola Sturgeon and our insistence on keeping
a no-fly zone? I think it would be foolish. All it would take would be one errant missile to either knock down a Russian plane or knock down a United States plane, a NATO plane, and we'd be off and running. And it would be very hard to pull back then. What they were doing, again, I'm not a military expert, but I can only go by what I'm seeing. What they were doing by supplying surface to air missiles and what have you, which are purely defensive, then that's to the Ukrainians to use themselves. Stingers and the like, they're purely defensive. To me, that seemed to be the way to do it. To let don't abandon the Ukrainians, help them defend themselves, but not don't act overtly offensive. There might come a time when something like that needs to happen, but I don't think the time's now.
Right.
And I think the chance an incident occurring, it would be so easy for it to happen.
Aye, it's. I mean, I always view Scotland as a
of course,
a peace-loving country, you know. And for Nicola Sturgeon, the only people that I've seen muting this possibility of the no-fly zone has been the Ukrainian PM, or whatever, president, whatever he is, the PM, and Nicola Sturgeon. That concerns me.
You've got to remember that, Mr. Zelensky's doing what he's got to do to protect his country. Okay, so that's fair enough. I would let him, if he wants to say things like that, then fair play. He's got to get as much support as he can for his country. So that's fair enough for him. For the First Minister's point of view, I did think it was an extremely reckless statement, because we are a target. Yep. We are a target. We are indeed. I remember, oh my God, I remember going into Cllr. I was working in Cllr, and the guys were checking below me, just as I inside, checking below my van. I suspect he's looking for explosives. I said, open the back door. And the back door was absolutely full of gelignite, the back of the van. But anyway, I think that would be I think it was a very reckless statement.
Mhm.
But again, when you look at who Nicola Sturgeon has admired in the past, the likes of Henry Kissinger. Do you remember she come
Aye.
on saying how great Henry Kissinger is,
Mhm.
how great Hillary Clinton. These are hawks.
Yeah, they're warhawks, aye.
She likes the hawks.
Aye,
You know, so that's again that's a very concerning thing.
it's not really good for denuclearising Scotland when these are
Oh my
the-
God! But one of I think I don't know if I said this to you. One of the best laughs I ever got was at the 2012 conference in Glasgow, when all the SNP Hegians were up on the stage. We were voting in NATO. We're going to vote in NATO, and all the hall was shouting against it, and all the Hegians and the paid employees were shouting for it. And it was to be a member of NATO, but the general feeling amongst the ordinary members was, no, we don't want to be a member in NATO. At that time, I don't know if it's changed now, but certainly at that time. And of course, that was before these were stage managed. These were honest, they were fantastic conferences. Because
that was when the SNP done conferences, aye.
Aye, well, I kind of know they don't want to more, aye. But I mean, the place was absolutely choker. It was standing room only, plus extra rooms with video feeds. It was absolutely full, and it was a free and open debate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the likes a couple of years ago, Chris McAleeney getting up and getting booed. You know, that never happened. That never, and I seen that at a hustings event doing when they were selecting an MS, who to go for MSP, and these are the people that were starting. There were two SNP folk that were going against one another, but they're booing. Their supporters are booing the opposite. And I actually said to them, I says, "Don't." I said, "What are you booing them for?" I said, "Let's hear what they're going to say." I said, we all care what we're going to go vote, but I said, we should be listening to them to see if they can change our mind. I said, but don't boo.
In 2012, when there was talk of NATO, who was the leader at that point?
It was Alex Salmond.
All right, what's your thoughts on Alex Salmond?
I think Mr. Salmond's had a really dirty deal done to him. That's my view. That is my view. I think he has no case to answer. I think, and it's the First Minister's inner circle, but I've had my own view of whether she's involved or not. But obviously, we've got to watch what we're saying, because we could end up doing a Craig Murray.
Aye, well, that's another thing.
Right, we could end up doing a Craig Murray. And full respect to Ambassador Murray, I don't agree with him in quite a few things. But I did agree with him that on his reports for the courthouse.
Yep.
And then when you seen that absolute travesty, a documentary where I think it was the missed days 7, 8, and 9 that were the defence, or 8, 9, and 10, whatever days it was, they missed them out completely, because the defence evidence just blew apart the whole tissue fabrication.
Aye.
See how I didn't use the word lies there? I used fabrication. That's really quite good, that. So it blew it apart. And I honestly think that if the First Minister wasn't actively involved, she knows everybody that was involved. And when she said that she didn't know who was involved at the inquiry, the inquiry, I believe that she wasn't being forthcoming.
Aye, I agree with that. I mean, I sat and watched the inquiry. I sat and watched Alex Salmond speaking for the length of time that he did. He's a statesman, as far as I can see, and always has been. And for Nicola Sturgeon to sit through the inquiry and not remember a lot of the stuff that will be the biggest thing in her life ever.
50 points, I think it was. She couldn't recall, or she had to, I'll need to check up on that and get back to you. I think it was like that. And to be honest with you, a woman she's a trained lawyer, she should have a forensically operating brain, and she should be able to recall, especially, and of course, before you go into any inquiry like that, you do your homework. You make sure going so you can't be tripped up. You know, you have to have all your ducks in a row so that when they hit you with a question, you don't have to, oh, well, I'll come back to you in that one. You can give them an answer. But of course, she didn't do that.
Right, well, let's get to this wee clip that I was going to share. This is where how we go into that. We digressed there, but it's good to digress. So let's play this wee clip here.
A lot of, particularly, I think, a woman in politics, that you get patronised by men. A lot of the time I've probably been patronised by better men than Alistair Jack along the way, to be perfectly honest about it. But you don't have to look very far right now within defence and security and intelligence circles to see many experts making the same point that I was making, which is that NATO and the world, the democratic world generally, should not necessarily be writing Vladimir Putin blank cheques of assurance and giving him a sense that he can act with impunity and there's no military consequences. That's not advocating a particular course of action. As I said very clearly last week, there are very good reasons why the war should not be escalated into a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO, and I think the judgments around that are the right ones at this stage. But in a situation like this, which is deteriorating, rapidly deteriorating, with the death and destruction that is being visited upon Ukraine by a war criminal, and that is what Vladimir Putin is, there's no doubt about that, then I think there should be some uncertainty in his mind about what the consequences for his atrocious actions might be. So that's the point I was making. I am far from alone in making that point, but these are issues that demand right now the greatest degree of sensitivity and the greatest degree of proper consideration. They certainly should not be issues that lead to, you know, sort of tit for tat between Scottish politicians.
Right, so that was the clip. That was her doubling down, because she'd said a few days prior to it about no-fly zone. That was her doubling down on it.
Right, to parse her clip, then actually she started off perfectly correctly. The misogyny is absolutely horrendous, not just in Scottish politics, but in politics in general. It's absolutely dreadful. And I do remember when Nicola Sturgeon stood for Govan, I think it was 3 times on the list, and whoever it was he was a QC fellow, I believe. I think maybe it might even have been Alex Salmon's attorney, but he actually said after he won against her a 3rd time, they get to keep her. Right, he said that is an absolute horrendous thing to say, absolutely dreadful. So she's right in what she's saying. My problem is that I don't think she's looked far enough ahead to the consequences, what a full-scale European war would do. And it would probably turn into a full-scale world war. We'd all have to go to Tahiti or something to try and escape it. But and that's what would happen if NATO put planes into the air above the Ukraine. And it's just so easy for an accident to happen, and off you go.
We could end up, as you say, with no means to get to Tahiti, but we'd be closer to by the time the explosions went off. Let's put it that way.
But certainly, we do need to support the Ukrainian people. We really do. Again, these are only my view, right? And I'm a miner. I'm not a soldier. But it's only my view. But we need to support the Ukrainian people. We can't see the horrible things that are happen forever until it becomes like the Czechoslovakian crisis, where the tanks are all through the Ukraine, and that's the Ukraine lose forever to the new Iron Curtain kind of thing. So we definitely need to support. But I don't. I think putting NATO planes in the air above the Ukrainian border or Ukrainian land above there, I don't think that's the way to go.
No.
As I said before, supplying them with anti-aircraft missile systems and as much material as we can do, as we can get them, and taking as many as their refugees out of them, away from there as we can, to protect them, so that the Russians don't have soft targets
Mhm.
If you see what I mean, you draw those people away if we
Aye.
can. Of course, we're not, and again, we're not according to those idiots doing in Westminster. They're doing with their world beaten, and I don't know
Aye.
what world they're in, but certainly know the one that we're inhabiting.
It's not the real world that we're in.
No, it's not the
You're
one
quite
we're in.
right. No, we're almost at an end, John. Right, but there was something else I wanted to get to, because your announcement on Twitter kicked off a chain of events, right? And I need to ask you about this. Right?
Aye.
I need to ask you about this. Pronouns went missing across the country.
I know.
Did you take them away?
Well, they're actually out in my shed. I'm holding them hostage. But I had to dug out the back earlier on so you could do a pee, and I could hear the pronouns squealing in the shed, so I'm maybe just going to let them go.
Aye, it's been a wee bit of an amusing
diversion.
Aye, an amusing diversion, but it just seemed to be that you had just announced your resignation and got to be
But I see there another gentleman, I believe it's a councillor for Stirling. Is it? I would need to look it up. But he's an SNP councillor as well, and he's resigned his place in the party.
Right.
It's on Twitter. You'll find it. I should have actually had it sitting for us coming on, but I forgot all about it. I forgot to do it because I was so utterly nervous coming on.
Well, see that, and was it that bad?
Yep.
Aye. Cheers, mate. Right. So there's been as you say, another one, but there was 3 female councillors have stood down for the Glasgow, and there has been allegations of Nicola Sturgeon contacting.
Yes, I've seen that. A young gentleman.
A young gentleman who contributed towards the harassment of Joanna Cherry, who I noticed in your bio, your Twitter bio, that you stand with Joanna Cherry is one of the things that's there. It appears to be that harassing women seems to be the only vetting that the new SNP are qualifying with, because we were talking about misogyny there, and I'm all for calling out misogyny and saying, but you can't call this form of misogyny
no
is all right, and then the form of misogyny that real women suffer is no all right.
We're back to what we said, what I said before, again, for that line for the book. Either everybody counts or nobody counts. You can't protect that person without protecting that person. You've got to protect them all. And no one woman is worthy of more protection than any other woman. And Joanna Cherry's treatment within the SNP has been horrendous. It's been absolutely dreadful. And that carry on to shoehorn Angus Robertson into Edinburgh to prevent Joanna Cherry coming up the road. That is an absolute disgrace. And no harm to Mr. Robertson. All he does well in his life, but he's not half the politician that Joanna Cherry is. No. And she would be such an asset to the Scottish government having her here.
Aye.
You know,
I totally agree with that.
Again, I tend to believe. I mean, the thing that really got me. Remember, Mr. Blackford led them on the walkout, right? No, when he got punted his cell, but when he stood up and everybody followed at him, and they got something like 10,000 new members within a couple of days. Why does he not do that every week? Or why does he not just actually do that and just no go back?
Aye, well, I think that should be the ultimate goal. It should be the case that Scotland stands up. I mean, the Treaty of the Union has been
it's been broken 100 times.
Shredded. It's been shredded.
Shredded. It has indeed.
And we're the Scottish people are the people that are suffering the consequences of that at every opportunity. The Internal Markets Bill is going to decimate Scotland.
Right. So if I can just say something, you know how we were talking about when I said I worked in Ireland, right? Right, I worked in Ireland, and when I was travelling from, I would get off a ferry at Larne, and sometimes I'd have to drive all the way to Galway, right? So you go down through Monaghan, go Armagh, then Monaghan, down to Cavan, and then down to through Granard. and over to I still remember it, Longford, Roscommon, Galway. That's how you did. But when you went through Granard, there's a square in Granard where Michael Collins gave a speech. And I've got the photograph somewhere where he's standing giving a speech. And when they did the film with Liam Neeson, they filmed it in the square. Now, I could never go through Granard without thinking of Michael Collins. You know, giving the speech. I'm driving over the bit where that man stood, you know. And I always, what happened was, the thing that got me was when they had their election in 1921, they had their election, was it 22, and they got an overwhelming majority of this Sinn Féin, or Irish Independent at the time. And they just said, we're not going, that's us. We'll just start the Dáil. And that's what they did. Now, why did we not do that in 2015 when we had 56 out of 59? Just say, that's us. This is Holyrood, and just start it there. Bring them all home, start a convention, and we could have done it. We had an overwhelming mandate, and if they had from the people of Scotland with 56 MPs, and if we had done that, Cameron couldn't have done nothing.
No. Right,
because if Cameron tried, it would have been in breach of every international treaty and it's been created. They'd have kicked the Brits out of the UN. If he sent in troops again, which is the only way we would have managed to do it was be to escalate. Because if we had made a political decision to withdraw, or we don't withdraw, we dissolve. We don't secede. There is no secession. Secession is when you're a member of a state and you pull away, as in the southern states in the American Civil War. They were secessionists. We're no secessionists. No. We're equal members, equal signatories to a treaty. We're dissolutionists. We want to dissolve the treaty. You know, if you see what I mean. I know it's pedantic, but words count.
Words, they matter. Oh God, I could go on for hours, but I've only set this up for an hour. So I want to get this in. Thank you for coming on here, especially given all of your press releases and obligations that you've had to cover all the past few days, because I know you've been would be busy trying to get all that information out there.
I don't say I don't know. Did I say to you I had a photographer the day?
Well, please tell her the audience.
I'd prefer. No, and it wasn't my idea. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't my idea. So with a professional photographer, and I was getting my photos taken, and he the lights set up. We're up the hill near one of the reinstated open, absolutely gorgeous, lovely scenery. And he's saying, right, turn this way, turn that way, and that. And I was screwed up until I was doing great. Turn this way, and then he says, flick your hair, and that was me. That was me. I was going. That was it. He says, flick your hair. So I wished I could, but there you go. No, that's right. I'd recall. I'd said to you earlier on. I couldn't remember whether I meant to tell you. I couldn't remember whether to tell you or not.
Aye, it was nice to hear, and it'd be nice for the recording for our viewers to hear as well, because we like a wee bit of a laugh. Now, have you got a message for the electorate in your ward for the upcoming local council elections? Then,
well, I would only say to them, I hope I've done enough over the past 10 years to warrant your trust. And if you elect me for another 5 years, then I'll carry on doing what I have been doing, which is representing my constituents to the best of my abilities. And I have got it has been said to me that I've got a reputation as a man who doesn't let go. So if you've got a problem and you need it fixed and it's council related, let me ken about it, and I'll do what I can to sort it out.
Magic John. Right, so it's good night for Tweed Street Scotland occupied. Right. It's good night for John Bell. It's good night for the Satirical Saltire, for Cinnamon Bridges, for the full works here. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, mate.
Thank you very much.
I wish you well for the upcoming local council elections.
Thank
you. I'll be looking out for your results, even though you're knowing my ward, you know the councillor from my ward. I'll be looking out for your results. I wish you well. And you never know, we might get on to independence, just the way that you've become an independent councillor. Be standing up for what's right, and the respect that you get, not just on Twitter, but in general, because this is a Twitter-based podcast. But the respect that I've seen in all your comments, because I've read through them all. I made one myself as well, but I've read through all your comments, and the only people that I see that don't give a positive comment are the bitter people that think that the flying monkeys, so to speak, to coin a phrase that you have used.
Aye, the flying monkeys, aye.
Right. So
I have another phrase, but it's not actually for publication.
right. Well, that's us for the night. I'm just going to
yeah.
stop this here, and I'll hear that phrase in a wee minute then.